The supreme, profound, and sublime Dharma is difficult to encounter in a billion eons. Now I see it, hear it, receive it, and kept it. I vow to attain the true meaning of the Tathagata. In order to liberate all sentient beings, let us generate supreme bodhicitta. Well, I feel that there's not much to talk about, but I think it's better for us to go through this together. My eyesight really declined, and the prints are small. It might be better to look at it directly from the computer screen. Anyhow, today we'll talk about a mysterious phone call. It was back then when Phuntsok Rinpoche hosted the Sukhavati Dharma Assembly, which lasted for 15 days. Now, the Dharma throne that Phuntsok Rinpoche used back then during the Dharma Assembly is now placed at the front gate of Larangar Buddhist Academy. It is to commemorate the Dharma Assembly, the Sukhavati Dharma Assembly Phuntsok Rinpoche hosted. There are two Dharma thrones, which is located right at the roadside. Whenever you pass by here, you could pay a pilgrimage visit. It is on the left side of the gate. There are two Dharma thrones, one of which is the Dharma throne of Lama Muntsok, and the other one is Phuntsok Rinpoche's Dharma throne. It was on one afternoon, shortly after His Holiness finished teaching, someone came running and said to him, Khenpo Namdro is trying to phone you. Could you come to Napsar Township's office to answer it? Phuntsok Rinpoche is a very prompt person, and if anything, he would like to do things very promptly. For example, whenever we go outside, if we were to set the departure time at 6 a.m., he would be ready at 5 a.m. There was a time that when we came back from Mount Wutai, we stayed overnight at Baoguang Monastery, which is located at the foot of Mount Eme. Initially, we set the plan to depart at 6 a.m., but Phuntsok Rinpoche came out of his room at 5 a.m. The rest of us were still sleeping, so we got really anxious. And then our truck came. At that time, we didn't really have any public commute, such as buses and so on. We had to ride on a truck. When I climbed to the truck, I noticed that I lost my wallet. So right away, I jump off from the truck and to run to the meadow that I slept overnight and finally found my wallet. I run back with my wallet. The truck was about to start, so the rest of them were trying to pull me up to the truck. And finally, I got on. Back then, I remember also the roads of Mount Eme was all made of dirt. So at that time, when Phuntsok Rinpoche heard that someone trying to phone him, he right away stood up from the Dharma throne, and even before finishing chanting the Cane of Aspiration prayer, he immediately stood up and asked me to accompany him to the office to answer the phone. Also, back then we only had one landline. We had no idea what a fax machine is, and I think fax is such a rare and such a wondrous thing, because you could receive a letter at the time when people are sending it directly to you. I thought that was just completely wondrous. Anyhow, back then in Larangar, we didn't have any phones. There was only one landline in the office. The office was was still further away than where it is now. In my memory, my impression of that office is rather very old and really dirty. The landline, the phone is also really dirty. The quality of the phone is really bad as well. And then Phuntsok Rinpoche kept on shouting into the phone saying that this is Jipong, this is Jipong. But Jipong is the abbreviated form of Jigme Phuntsok. That's how he used to call himself. So we passed the phone back and forth and finally understood what was going on. It was that Khenpo Namdro traveled all the way from India to Hong Kong and then arrived from Hong Kong to Chengdu. He has already prepared the itinerary of Phuntsok Rinpoche's dharma trip, and the time is running out. So he's trying to urge us to get our passport and visas ready. We have to get the visas as soon as possible, otherwise it is not possible for us to go. But Phuntsok Rinpoche was back then giving teachings at the Sukhavati Dharma Assembly, so he had to stay. I myself took all the passports because back then I had no concept that we have to be applying for the visas in person. So I took all the passports of Animidro, of Lama Mentso, of Phuntsok Rinpoche, and then I took all the documents to Chengdu. Well, before this particular time, we also had an experience of applying for certain documents and passports in Chengdu, but the way of applying for passports were different, though. When I arrived at Chengdu, firstly, I got together with Khenpo Namdro, and then we went to the consulate, the United States consulate. The consulate back then, in fact, stayed in that location since the 60s, but since President Trump took office, that office is no longer there. I remember that it was rather a very small consulate and has only 2 houses and a small yard. When I was lying up, I remembered a young girl dressed in gray. She was really upset of getting rejected. She kept on crying and then eventually fainted. There was another person. Not only he got rejected, his passport got a special marking or a stamp marking that he's no longer able to travel abroad anymore. I'm not sure if it is still valid, if it is still the same kinds of procedure or the same kinds of stamp. I really wanted to travel with Phuntsok Rinpoche, especially the developed countries such as the United States and Canada. I think it would be very meaningful. But on the other hand, while I'm really eager to travel with him, on the other hand, I was afraid if we won't get our visas, because without it, we won't be able to travel. Back then, since I had no idea that the person who applies for a visa has to be present, we tried our best anyhow. I gave the officer our passports, all of our passports. Also, not only it is difficult to apply for visas, I remember that the consulate only opens 1 or 2 days a week. So when I give the passports of ours to the officer, who is a red-haired and tall-nosed and very tall Western man, he looked at our passports and then asked a few questions saying that, have you been to the United States and what are you going to do there, so on and so forth. I think he was quite happy with our answers because he said that while initially he said that if you don't have those people who applies for a visa to be present, I cannot issue you the visas. And then later, after we gave our answers, answers, he agreed, especially when I said that this is a great master and he has pressing obligations and events to attend, and there's really nothing that we can do. Also, we need to get the visa. Would you please help us? Would you give us some leeways? And then when he looked at us who were wearing the maroon robes, he was very interested, and then his attitude changed. Eventually, he gave us the pass stamps for the visas. After we got the visas, we went back to Khenpo Namdrol's hotel. At that time, I think Khenpo Namdrol, the hotel that Khenpo Namdrol stayed is rather very luxurious. I mentioned that in my journal of traveling to India. When I first stepped into that hotel, there are some carpets on the floor, and then there is a telephone in his room. It was wondrous for me because that was the first time I've ever seen such a luxurious hotel. After we chatted a bit in the hotel, Khenpo Namdrol asked me, saying that, "How do you know my number in this hotel?" And I was stunned. I asked, "Didn't you call us? We went to the Napsar township to answer your phone call." Khenpo Namdrol was really surprised, saying that I had no idea that the township has a telephone. He said that when he first arrived in Chengdu, he couldn't get in touch with anyone he knew. At first, he tried to reach the two people who knew from Serta. One is the minister whose name is Zhixie from the Religious Bureau, and the other one is Zhou Wang from the Industry Trade Bureau, but neither of them answered their phone calls. So he couldn't get in touch, and at that time he didn't know that there is a phone in Larongar. He felt that he had completely squandered his time and without having achieved any progress. So he had something for lunch and then dozed off in the afternoon. While he was taking a nap, his phone rang in his room, and then when he answered the phone, he heard that, "Oh, this is Jipeng, this is Jipeng, this is the whole event." Well, as you know, back then, between different cities, the phone calls between different cities, in fact, are considered as long distance, and then it was very expensive. But Khenpo Namdrol didn't pay for the bills of that phone call, neither did us. I thought he called and he thought we called. It was really rare. I'm not speaking of lies. Khenpo Namdrol is still alive. I have not prepared him for this information, so if you don't believe me, you can go and ask him. After our trip together, we got in touch a few times, one of which was a few years ago. We stayed in a hotel and chatted a bit, and Khenpo Namdrol said that it was such a rare event. We had no idea that neither of us called each other. From a worldly point of view, it is such a myth. But maybe it was the protectors or some other kinds of connections, some other kinds of causes and connections that actually made us being able to communicate with each other back then. But till now, there is no clue. We have no idea what happened back then, that we were actually able to get in touch with each other. Now, this is the first part, and the second part is rather short. After we got our visas, I came back to Larongar, and back then, the Sukhavati Dharma Assembly still has not concluded. When I told Phuntsok Rinpoche that we got the visas, Phuntsok Rinpoche appeared to be very pleased. Around that time, it was the end of the Dharma Assembly. Phuntsok Rinpoche then publicly told everyone that he is going to the West. West. He specifically said that I am going to the West not to take tours, nor to enjoy, nor to have different kinds of enjoyments. Rather, I think it is a very important dependent arising to benefit sentient beings and propagate the dharma. If I cannot make it back this time, there is a possibility that I won't be able to make it back this time because there are all kinds of challenges. But if I can really go there and propagate the dharma and benefit sentient beings, I think it would be a very unique opportunity. For that reason, I hope that all the sangha would chant the protector's chants and all different kinds of sutras and so on. He also made the announcement about about the people who's going to accompany him, one of which is Khenpo Namdro from outside and me from here. Phuntsok Rinpoche said that since the place that we're going is really far away, I really don't know if these people would be able to make it back. And Phuntsok Rinpoche said that since I have already talked to my sister and Lama Mintsok, and they said that they're okay if they cannot make it back. But in terms of Khenpo Sodargye, since the Toku Disha and Khenpo Deba from Doma Monastery has close relationships with me, so I really hope that they won't find troubles to me if Khenpo Sodargye won't be able to come back. I thought to myself at the moment that since whatever Phuntsok Rinpoche said about me, I really remember it clearly, let it be praises or scoldings. So when he said that maybe I won't be able to come back, my heart just skipped a beat. I'm not sure if I would be able to come back. That was definitely something hanging in the air. Also, at the moment, I felt really happy because in the Dharma assembly, lots of people were there, and many people from my hometown were there as well. And Phuntsok Rinpoche specifically talked about me, and I was very honored about it. Because when I first got ordained and became a monk, many of my relatives, my uncle included, started saying that I'm hopeless because I gave up a stable life where I can receive stable salaries, and then got ordained and started living in a little hut that is made of grass and mud. In their mind, I am simply staying there waiting to die. There are all kinds of rumors about me. Anyhow, I thought to myself that since lots of people from my hometown has arrived and they have already heard about what Phuntsok Rinpoche said about me, I considered it as an honor and somewhat arrogant about it. Phuntsok Rinpoche also asked the Sangha, Khenpos and Khenmos, to give teachings to all the fellow Sanghas. I think back then we had about 1,000 people or so, not many. And Phuntsok Rinpoche asked everyone to practice to study and contemplate and practice the Dharma. Before I depart, I also chose a Khenmo Zhawu, and Khenpo Dzogchen to give Dharma teachings on the way of the Bodhisattvas. I also thought that if my parents don't want to return to the hometown, they can stay in Larongar, and I borrowed a black yak hair made tent for them. So these are some of the opening scenes with important peoples introduced. Anyhow, this time when we travel abroad, I myself has more experiences because I've already traveled to many places with Phuntsok Rinpoche, such as Dokang area, such as Mount Wutai, as well as India. Since we had the financial restrictions back then, we didn't have enough money to bring more people. Phuntsok Rinpoche said that he would be only bring me. When we traveled to India, Lama Sodong was in charge of meals and in general the lively chores. And then Lama Rupa is in charge of medication and health of Phuntsok Rinpoche. But Phuntsok Rinpoche told me that no one else is following us, is coming with us. You will be in charge of everything. So I feel quite pressured about that. This time I will be in charge of the clothing, food, commute, and he's staying at different places as well as Phuntsok Rinpoche's health. On top of that, I have to prepare for different implements and rituals that's related to dharma. It indeed is quite a lot of pressure. I remember that within the 3 years of travel, I carried a yellow bag that I brought back from India. In the bag, there's the recorder, and there's notebook, and cameras, and so on. They are very good companions to carry around. On the 12th of June, that's the second day of the completion of the Dharma assembly, we departed from Larangar. There were many people who bid us farewell, and some even followed us all the way to Dzogchen. And then over there, Phuntsok Rinpoche met up with an old friend of his. That old friend reminded him that since everything is rather quite impermanent, things could change, and there are lots of tension going on, so it's better for you to cross the borders as soon as possible. On the 13th, the group of us traveled all the way from there to Chengdu, and then when we arrived Chengdu, it was the early morning. In fact, we took the 5 o'clock early morning flight to Guangzhou, and after we arrived at Guangzhou, it was around noontime. At the airport, we were received by a 40-year-old woman who dressed in red, who looked like someone with great merit. She told us that she's been waiting for us at the airport. And then she told us that she has already made all the arrangements of our living and our food and all of that. But none of us knew her. Khenpo Namdrol and then Annie Meidrol and Lama Mentok, none of us know about this person. I didn't quite believe her back then, especially when she says that she made arrangements of the food and clothes and livelihood and the living arrangements and so on. So I didn't really want to say that we will go with her. But Phuntsok Rinpoche said that, she looks like someone that is a devoted Buddhist, so we can follow her. And then she took us to a good hotel and into this private room in a hotel. We had a very good lunch. There was rather quite a luxurious private room. After that, we stayed at a hotel that is on the 3rd floor. We stayed over a day, and then on the next day, we crossed the border.